They have forsaken me, the fountain of living waters, and hewed out cisterns for themselves, broken cisterns that can hold no water. Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 13. The previous chapter left us at the high water mark, a nation of slaves named, rescued, taught, and indwelt. Given a God they could never have invented, a morality they did not source, and a presence they did not manufacture. After a story like that, one braces for, and they lived happily ever after. What one gets instead is the most sobering turn in the whole Bible. They forgot. Not the way one forgets a name rarely used. They forgot with the instructions still in their hands and God's own tent still pitched in the middle of the camp. And how they forgot is the lesson of this chapter. For they did not do it as one might expect. They did not march off and adopt a brand new God. They did something far more familiar, far closer to home, and far more dangerous. They kept the true God's name and quietly remade him into someone they could manage. If this book has had one refrain from the first page, it is that we are frighteningly good at fabricating religion straight out of the true faith with the real God's name on our lips. Israel is where the Bible itself proves it. One would suppose the fabricating might at least wait for the glow of Sinai to fade. It did not last a month. Moses is still on the mountain, receiving the instruction when the people below grow restless and persuade Aaron to make them a god they can actually see. He melts their gold into the shape of a calf. And here is the line not to rush past. They look at the metal statue and say, "These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt." Aaron then builds an altar before it and proclaims a feast to the Lord, a feast to God himself. Feel exactly what they did, for it is the whole disease in one scene. They did not say, "Let us abandon the Lord and worship a new God." They took the rescue they had just lived through and the very name God had just given them and stamped both onto a thing they had made with their own hands. They kept the name. They remade the god. The calf was very probably not meant as a rival deity at all, but as a pedestal for the invisible God, a way of making him visible, local, and handleable. That is the made-up mind caught in the act, a few verses after the law was given. Not the sin of pagans who never knew better, but the sin of the rescued, with the truth still ringing in their ears. The calf was not a single stumble. It was the template for the next 1,000 years. Read the book of Judges and watch the same wheel turn over and over. One generation is faithful, then there arose another generation after them who did not know the Lord, and off they go after the gods of the people next door. The lesson is quiet and devastating. The received mind is not inherited automatically, is not in the blood. Every generation must receive it afresh, and Israel kept failing to hand it on. And the drift was almost never a clean break. It was blending. They went on worshiping the Lord, and added a little Baal for the rain, a little Asherah for the crops, a shrine on this hill, a household idol on that shelf. That is the made-up mind's favorite maneuver, and it is far more comfortable than open rebellion. One does not reject the true God. One simply stirs him together with the spirit of the age until the two can no longer be told apart. Most fabricated religion has never been atheism. It has been mixture. Here is the part the Bible warns of most sharply, and we feel least, because a made-up God is no harmless decoration. It does something back. Hear how the Psalms describe the idols. They have mouths, but do not speak, eyes, but do not see, ears, but do not hear, dead, blind, deaf. And then the hook. Those who make them become like them. So do all who trust in them. When the kingdom at last falls, the historian renders the same verdict in one brutal line. They went after worthless idols and became worthless. That is the law of the counterfeit, and there is no slipping it. The God one makes does not merely sit on a shelf. It reaches back and reshapes its maker into its own image. Worship something blind, and you go blind to the real God. Worship something deaf, and you slowly lose the power to hear him. The made-up mind is not a cost-free mistake one carries about at no charge. It quietly remakes the worshiper into the likeness of the nothing he bowed to. We do not merely hold our counterfeits. Given time enough, we become them. So, God send the prophets, and observe how they prosecute the case. They do not arrive scolding about broken rules, as though this were a clerical problem. They come heartbroken, and they speak like a betrayed husband. For that is what the covenant at Sinai had been, a marriage. The God who named himself had bound this people to himself as a bridegroom binds himself to a bride, and now the bride has been unfaithful, running to other lovers, giving herself to every god on offer. Hosea is even told to marry an unfaithful woman, that he might feel from the inside what Israel has done to God. Jeremiah names the betrayal as adultery, so plainly that God hands the northern kingdom a certificate of divorce. And then Jeremiah says the truest thing in the whole prophetic library, the sentence that holds this entire book in a single image. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living waters, and hewed out cisterns for themselves, broken cisterns that can hold no water. There it is, what the made-up mind always does. It walks away from the living spring, the God who simply is, who gives himself freely, and goes off to hew its own tank in the rock. A God of its own making, its own design, fully under its own control. And the tank is always cracked. It always leaks. One labors and sweats to build a manageable faith, and then stands dying of thirst beside it, wondering why it holds nothing. A made-up God can no more give living water than a golden calf could carry anyone out of Egypt. In the end, forgetting the name cost them everything. Ezekiel watches the unthinkable. The glory of God, the very presence that had filled the tabernacle, rises up and leaves the temple, withdrawing to the east. The marriage is shattered, the land is lost, and the people are dragged into exile. The made-up mind, run out to its full national length, ends precisely where it began in the days of Noah, in unmaking. But not a nothing. Even at the blackest hour, God keeps his remnant. The same quiet promise we have leaned on all along. The 7,000 who never bowed to Baal. They were always there, hidden, kept. The bride could break the marriage. She could not cancel the God who refuses to let his people disappear. Now, we reach the question this tragic chapter forces upon us, and it is the hinge of all that remains. Why? Why could they not hold on to it? This was the one nation on earth possessing the real God, the real rescue, the real instruction, the real presence in its midst. If anyone alive could have kept the receive mind, it was Israel, and they could not for a single generation running. The prophets give the answer, and it proves to be the very answer we met in chapter 1. The problem was never that the instruction was unclear. The problem is that it sat outside them, carved on tablets, inked on scrolls, read aloud in their ears, while the heart beneath stayed bent. And a bent heart goes on fabricating no matter how excellent the instructions. One cannot mend a counterfeiting heart by handing it a better rulebook. It will simply learn to counterfeit obedience as well. So, the prophets begin, even in the dark of exile, to promise something genuinely new. Not another set of tablets, but a different kind of heart altogether. I will put my law within them, and I will write it on their hearts, God says. I will give you a new heart, and a new spirit I will put within you, and I will put my spirit within you. This is the new covenant, and it is the door the rest of this story walks through. But the promise must be heard precisely, because it sits very near a fatal misreading. It would be easy to take a new heart within you as the awakening of something already latent in the self, a divine spark, a true inner self, roused at last, is the opposite of that. And the grammar makes the difference unmistakable. I will put, I will give, I will write. Every verb has God for its subject. What is new is not a buried treasure of the self now uncovered, but God's own instruction and God's own spirit implanted from outside into the core of a person. The source is wholly external. It is given, breathed in, put within, while the locus of the renewal is internal, the heart itself remade. The cure still comes from outside the self, as everything in this book does. What is new at the New Covenant is that it is now written on the inside, in a heart God Himself replaces. Before we move on, do not slip off the hook, for this chapter is a mirror, and it is aimed straight at us. The people who fabricated were not the ignorant pagans down the road. They were the ones with the scriptures, the temple, the worship, the right words. They could recite the law while bowing to a calf. Which means the one thought this chapter takes from us forever is the comfortable one. That could never be me. I have a Bible, I attend church, I know the words. So did they. Holding the truth in one's hands has never once kept a human being from quietly remaking God into someone more agreeable. We keep the name Jesus and pour into it our politics, our grudges, our culture, our appetites, until the Christ we worship is one we could have carved ourselves. The made-up mind does its finest work inside the sanctuary, with a Bible open on its lap. And the cure for us is the very one the prophets glimpsed from far off. Not a tighter grip on the rules, but a new heart we could never manufacture. Received, like everything else worth having, from the only one who can give it. Yet God did not leave His people with merely a promise for some distant future. Even through the long centuries of forgetting, He was already at work raising up one man, a shepherd boy with a harp, and calling him something no one else in all the Old Testament is ever called. A man after His own heart. Before we reach the new heart God means to give the whole world, we must meet the King who, for all His ruin, kept showing us what one looks like.